All right, in math today, we're going to begin with our success criteria. We know that we are working on partitioning shapes into parts with equal areas. So we have learned about the area inside of a shape, and we have learned about different shapes. But this week, we're really focused on fractions. We're focused on what happens when you have a shape and you partition it into equal parts. Today we're going to practice, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some notes in our notebook. So right now, students need to get their math notes with the purple tape and a pencil ready to take some notes. Go ahead and get that, please. In our notebook, we want to start with our notes that we took yesterday. As a reminder, here are some vocabulary words that are important. Whole, here's a picture. It means all parts of an item or a set of things. So whole is when all of them come together, you have one whole. Part means a piece of the whole. And here we shaded one of the parts. Fraction means part of a whole represented by a numerator and denominator. This is where we're going to start today. Yesterday, we drew an example of a fraction, and we labeled the numerator and the denominator. Today, we're going to write more in our definition of numerator and denominator. So first, let's remind ourselves that the numerator is on top. The numerator is the top number in a fraction. I'm going to add some words here. I'm going to define what a numerator is, and I want you to write the same thing as me. The numerator tells how many pieces are being used. A numerator tells how many pieces are being used. The top number tells how many pieces, how many parts are being used. Go ahead and write your definition of a numerator, please. All right, now we're ready to define denominator. Remember yesterday, we learned a little trick. Denominator is the bottom number in a fraction. The way that we can remember it is remembering the word down. Down starts with D, just like denominator starts with D. You can practice memorizing. Denominator is down. It's on the bottom. Numerator on top. That will help us. Well, what is the denominator? What is it? We're going to write the definition right here. The numerator tells us how many pieces are being used. The denominator tells how many pieces in the whole. The denominator tells how many pieces in the whole. So our top number, our numerator, says how many pieces are being used. The bottom number, called the denominator, tells how many pieces are in the whole. That's what these two numbers mean. Check that you have your denominator definition recorded in your notes. Great job, third grade. Okay, now I'm going to turn the page because I'm out of room. We're going to define another vocabulary word, and then we're going to draw some examples together. So now we know a little bit more about numerator and denominator. Today I'm going to teach you about a special type of fraction. Let's go to our next blank page. I'm going to go to the top of my page. The word we're going to learn today is actually a phrase. It's called a unit fraction. A unit fraction. Go ahead and record your vocabulary word. In just a second, if I can get it clear. Sorry about that. Here we go. Unit fraction. Go ahead and record, please. Now we're going to write the definition of a unit fraction. A unit fraction is sort of like the word part. Remember, we have a whole, and then part means one of the pieces. That's sort of the same thing as a unit fraction. The unit fraction is the name of each part in a whole. A unit fraction is the name of each part in a whole. So we have been learning about the whole, when all the parts come together. Part means one of the pieces, and unit fraction is what we call that part. We give it a name. We're going to do some examples of this together in just a minute. Okay, it is time for us to show some examples of what this means. It's time for us to have some models, to partition the models, and to show the unit fraction. That means we're going to show the name of each part in a whole. So let's draw some models here. I'm going to start with a rectangle model. Draw it with me. Draw a rectangle model. Here is a shape. We are going to partition this shape into equal parts. I would like for us to partition this shape into 3 parts. Remember, we call that thirds. When we partition shapes, we cut them into equal parts. Notice how each part is about the same size. You need to make sure that when you partition a shape, you cut it into equal parts. I have cut this into 3 parts. So my whole shape is the whole. Each piece is called a part. I now want to name the unit fraction for each part. Here's how I can do this. First, I'm going to count the parts. I count 1, 2, 3 equal parts. That means my denominator is a 3. Remember our denominator Down goes on the bottom. The denominator tells us how many parts are in the whole. We just counted 1, 2, 3 parts. That means my denominator is 3. My numerator tells me how many pieces are being used. So my unit fraction, remember it's the name of each part. So if this part is 1 part of the whole, I call this one 1 fraction bar 3. I call that 1/3 because it is 1 piece, 1 part, and my whole has 3 total parts. Let's look at the next part, the next piece. This section, this part, is also 1 part, fraction bar. My denominator is 3. The name of this piece is 1 part out of 3 total parts. Our last piece also has the name 1/3. It has the same unit fraction because it is 1 part out of 1, 2, 3 total parts. When I put all these parts together, when I put 1/3 plus another 1/3 plus another 1/3, that equals the whole. When I put all the parts together, it equals the whole. Let's do a second example. This time, we're going to draw a circle model. Draw a circle model with me. When we do a circle model, a lot of times we want to start from the middle to cut them, to partition them equally. I start in the middle, and I would like us to partition this model into 4 equal areas. I have now partitioned the model into 4 equal areas, or 4 equal parts. Now I'm going to think about the name of these parts. I'm going to think about the unit fraction. I know that each one has a numerator of 1. Unit fractions always have a numerator of 1 because it's talking about 1 part. So I can write my numerator in each one, and then I can think about my denominator. Each part of a unit fraction has a numerator of 1. Now I need to think about my denominator. My first model had 3 equal parts. This model, I need to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. That means my denominator needs to be 4. So the name of each part is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. If I only had 1/4, it might look like that. If I had 2 1/4, I would add one more. If you gave me another 1/4, I would have 3 1/4. And when you give me a fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4 1/4 put together makes the whole. Boys and girls, we are going to practice this today. We're going to practice partitioning into equal parts. And we're going to practice writing the unit fraction. Don't forget that a unit fraction always has a numerator of 1. That's because it's talking about each part. And when we put all the parts together, we have the whole. Let's go find our seesaw task together. On Seesaw, please click on Activities, Assign to Class folder, blue for Math. Today our title is called Working with Unit Fractions. Go ahead and find our task, please. We're going to watch a video about unit fractions that will help us. Here we go.
What? Still searching YouTube for math help? Are the videos from 2006 real?
Unit fractions. Nicole works at a pizza restaurant. Her job is to take out pizza slices from the machine so the waiters can take them to the customers. The machine looks like a circle, and it is divided into 8 equal slots, as shown. So in each slot, there is 1 pizza slice ready. Let us look at this machine closely. Initially, we had 8 pieces, as you can see. 1 pizza slice is 1 part of the whole, or 1 slice out of 8 in total. So each slice can be represented by the fraction 1/8. Any fraction that has a numerator of 1 and a positive denominator is called a unit fraction. In our case, a unit fraction is 1/8. To find out how many unit fractions we have in the machine, we can count all the slices. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 slices. We can write down the unit fractions as we are counting. We have 8 1/8, or 8/8, which is our whole. All fractions are made up of unit fractions. We can break down any fraction to its unit fractions. For example, if Nicole already took out 4 slices, what is the fraction that shows how much pizza we have left? It is 4/8. How many unit fractions are there in 4/8? Every pizza slice represents a unit fraction 1/8. So how many unit fractions do we need to get 4/8? Let us count and write them down. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4 slices, or a total of 4 unit fractions. And 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 equals 4/8. In this lesson, you learned what a unit fraction is.
All right, boys and girls. So now we're going to watch a video from Mrs. Sousa where she's going to describe what our task is today. I want all of us thinking about our vocabulary like this. Just like the example of the pizza, when all of the parts are there, we have a whole. Here is our whole. Each part is a unit fraction. Any fraction with a 1 in the numerator is a unit fraction. So if you see the fraction 1/10, you know that's a unit fraction. If you see the fraction 1/5, you know that's a unit fraction. So Mrs. Sousa has shown us in the video that each part is 1/8. When you put all the parts together and you add all the fractions together, you get 8 pieces counted, 8 pieces total. That's the same thing as one whole pizza. We will talk more about this later as we work together. Our next video is the video where Mrs. Sousa is going to model exactly what our task is today. So let's focus our attention on how she partitions, how she labels, and how she answers the questions. Watch very closely because this is what you're going to do today.
When attempting to meet your goal to partition shapes into parts with equal areas and express the area of each part as a unit fraction of the whole, you may be given directions like this. 1. Partition this shape into equal 1/3 pieces. Now, we could use our drawing tools to try to partition the pieces, but when we don't make it equal, it's going to take a long time to erase the lines and reposition them. Plus, I'm a human, so I can make mistakes in keeping it straight. So, I'm going to show you a shortcut or a smarter way to work. Go to your Shapes tool and click on the short blue line. Now, I'm going to change the color so that it's more visible against my model. Now, when I want to make 1/3 pieces, I can simply adjust my line that is already straight, and I can stretch it out to fill the whole shape. When I want to add another section on my shape or another part, I can duplicate that line. Now, if I make the pieces too small, all I have to do is click and drag my lines to readjust the shape size. This is a much quicker and more efficient way to create your pieces. So now I have completed step 1. Partition this shape into equal 1/3 pieces. There are 3 parts or pieces on this rectangular model. 2 says label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. We know that unit fractions are any fraction with a 1 in the numerator that identifies one part. This is 1/3 of the rectangle. Inside of this middle piece is also 1/3 of the rectangle. On the right side, I also have 1/3 of the rectangle. So I have labeled each part as a unit fraction of the whole. Finally, I'm asked to identify the denominator, the name of the unit fraction, and how many unit fractions are on the whole. I know that denominators are the lower or bottom number in a fraction that tell how many parts are on the whole. I can see that there are 1, 2, 3 parts, and I can also see that 3 is the bottom number on each of these fraction names. So my denominator is a 3. There are 3 parts in the whole. The name of the unit fraction is one part of the whole. So the name of the unit fraction for this is 1/3. How many unit fractions are in the model? Again, I can count. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 unit fractions in the model. Notice that your denominator and the number of unit fractions in the model will be the same.
All right, boys and girls, we're going to try this together. We're going to open up our task together and practice partitioning, labeling the unit fraction, and answering the questions just like Mrs. Sousa. We're going to begin on slide 1 together. It says, with your teacher. You should be looking at slide 1. The directions tell us to partition the shape into 1/2 pieces. 1/2 is a fraction we have been working with since 2nd grade. We know all about halves. So I'm going to use the bar from my shapes, just like Mrs. Sousa taught me. And when I do 1/2, I can do it left to right like this, or I can turn it and do up and down like this. Both show 1/2. I'm going to do up and down today. You may choose if you would like to do left to right or up and down. I have now done step number 1. I partitioned the shape into equal areas. 2. Step 2 in the directions say, label each part as a unit fraction of the whole. I remember that unit fractions have a numerator of 1, so I can go ahead and write that. I know that all parts are going to have a numerator of 1. Numerator is on top. But now I need to think about my denominator. My denominator goes down on the bottom, and it tells me how many parts are in the whole. So I'm counting 1, 2 parts in my whole. That means my denominator is 2. My denominator is 2 for both unit fractions. Label each part using your unit fraction now. We have now done step 2. We just labeled each part with the unit fraction. Step 3 is when I fill in the blanks and answer the questions, just like Mrs. Sousa. Step 3 says, identify the denominator, name the unit fraction, and answer how many unit fractions are in the whole. So let's do one at a time. The first one says to name the denominator. I know my denominator is down on the bottom. I see over here, I have labeled 2 as my denominator. So I can put a 2 in the blank. The next question asks me to name the unit fraction. Remember, I've already done this work. I called each half 1/2. That's the name of each part. So the unit fraction is 1, fraction bar, 2, and we call that 1/2. Name your unit fraction right now. The last question says, how many unit fractions are in the model? I remember that my unit fraction is 1/2. So I can count how many parts I have or how many times I labeled 1/2. So I remember I counted 1, 2 equal parts. I labeled 1, 2 as 1/2. So my unit fractions, how many are in the model? I count twice that we wrote 1/2. So 2 unit fractions are in the model. Remember, Mrs. Sousa said that your denominator will be the same as how many unit fractions you have. If my denominator is 2, that means there are 2 equal parts. That means there are 2 unit fractions in the model. Today, 3rd grade, your work is to complete the rest of the slides, practicing these 3 steps. Starting on slide 2, it gives you the same directions we just did. You need to complete slides 2, 3, 4, 5, and show me what you know about partitioning, understanding the unit fraction, and counting the parts. When you are done, you need to tell me how you did on today's goals. How did you do partitioning shapes into equal areas? How did you do writing the unit fraction for each part? Tell me a reflection about you being successful or you need more practice. When you are done with your seesaw task, slide number 7 reminds you that you can go to Zern and practice unit fractions on Zern. Okay, that is it for today.